friends, if you are confused on whether you should go into a calorie deficit or eat enough, or how they could both change your body composition, that's what we're going to get into today. But first, I got to give you a heads up that this Sunday, if you're listening to this live, this Sunday, February 9th, Create Your Shape will be open for enrollment through the 23rd. This is for the March 2025 class. And this is my 4-month nutrition coaching program for ladies who lift weights and want to look like they lift weights. You can go to the link in the show notes or jennythenutritionist.com/create-your-shape to learn more and mark your calendars. And if you're not listening to this live, you can go to that same link to figure out when the next class is enrolling. But I wanted to share the 4 things that make Create Your Shape different. And the first is that it is tailored to ladies who are lifting weights. So everything in the program is specific for that person who already is strength training, which therefore you have different needs, and that is considered. And therefore you already have somewhat of a basic understanding of nutrition, and you don't need to be told to eat more vegetables, right? And don't go to McDonald's. So everything is tailored to that person who is already somewhat health conscious, but wants to take it to the next level. The second Create Your Shape difference is it is also designed for professional type A women. So there are just different values when it comes to ladies who think like this and who are in careers and focused on their careers, and not only how to include balance, where you are focused on work and you spend a lot of time at work, but also when you have travel and different things outside of just fitness, that is considered. Also, you're typically like me and like things presented and explained in a certain way, or being around females who are in a similar position and have similar values. So all the examples that I provide and also the conversations in the coaching are all going to benefit each other because we all have similar values in that sense. The third reason is education. You guys are smart and you want to be empowered with the understanding and the strategy of how this works. It's probably why you're listening to this podcast, because you like the education and you want to know how all of it actually works in the big framework instead of just getting one-off tips. And you want to really understand it so you can make decisions without having to become a nutritionist yourself. The fourth Create Your Shape difference is sustainability, both in the sense from your body, where everything we do considers your health and vitality. This is not just drop quick weight and then go back to what you're doing before and gain it back. That we really consider eating enough first and making sure your body is primed to not rebound from any changes that you make, for whether it be decreasing body fat or building muscle. That's on your shape, but then the mental side too. We focus on creating a nutrition routine that runs on autopilot. So you're just not getting a plan and doing something for a little bit and then going back to what you're doing before. You're completely rewiring your system at home, when you travel, when you have work events, to be able to create a whole new routine around nutrition and how you operate for the long term. A lot of my ladies say that they wish they had this in college, and it really is. They treat it like a college course where not only are you learning all of it, but you're also implementing it and then can build off of it for the long term. You can build off your knowledge base, but then you can also build off your shape. And every year, your shape just gets better and better. That's what we do in Create Your Shape. So get ready to join us at the link in the show notes. And now let's get into the difference between calorie deficit and eating enough and why you would use one or the other. So I'm going to read to you what was said. I'm confused. I hear I need to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose fat and gain muscle. And then I also hear I need to up my calories because I might not be eating enough. This is a recent question I got, and let me break this down. So first at a high level, and then I'll break it down a little bit more detail. So at a high level, building muscle and decreasing body fat are two separate things. So to build muscle optimally, you want enough nutrients. Then to decrease body fat, you are required to be in a calorie deficit in order for that to work. However, in a calorie deficit, it is just a formula between two numbers: how many calories you're consuming per day and how many calories you're burning per day. This is the kicker. How much you are burning per day will adapt and change based on a handful of things, like a suppressed metabolism from not eating enough over time, or it could be increased from eating more or adding more muscle. So now that you have the overview, let me break this down for each one. So first, building muscle. Think of building muscle like building a house. You have to have enough raw materials available to use to build that house, right? You have to have enough nutrients available to use to build that muscle. It's the same thing. So then I want you to think of decreasing in body fat more like cleaning and decluttering a house. Okay, so two different efforts here. For building muscle, the more raw ingredients you have to work with in the form of nutrients and food, the faster and better you will be at increasing muscle mass. The main thing is that you have a stimulus that is created that is going to kick off the process of building more muscle, and then you need the nutrients to support that process. So it's almost like, think of a construction site. You need the team there to start building, right? That you have to have someone to build the site. So that's the same thing as the training intensity. You have to be going hard enough in the gym to create a stimulus that signals like, all right, we're making changes around here. But then on that construction site, if they don't have enough wood, it's going to be really difficult for them to build that house. So then think of the wood or the raw materials as being the nutrients that you could provide your body to then build that muscle. So can you build muscle in a calorie deficit? For most of us, we can to some degree, right? Unless you are super lean and you're super trained, then at that point, probably no, barely at all, if any. But for the rest of us, we can to some degree, especially the more out of shape you are or the less muscle you have, or if you're newer to it, then you have a better chance of doing that at the same time. For my ladies specifically, and for someone like me, yes, I can a little bit, but you're not going to see much, right? And you're only going to get that if the training intensity and that stimulus is there. So it would be like trying to build a house or do a remodel and declutter the house at the same time, right? You're just going to be like fighting each other, and there's not going to be like one clear focus. So it's probably not best to do at the same time, and you're just not going to get as much out of it as if they are separate events and separate focuses. So then when it comes to decreasing body fat, you have to be in a calorie deficit. Like, that is required. And the calorie deficit is just a formula. So the formula is how much you're consuming per day versus, like, that needs to be less, significantly less, like 400, 500, 600 calories less than how much you're burning per day. So I want you to think of it as two bar charts, right? So how much you're burning per day, think of it as like the size of your hand. And then how much you're consuming per day is, let's say, the size of half of your hand, right? Or a little more than that. So think of that visual. So you have to have a gap between them, and you have to have that calorie deficit in order to trigger the pathways in your body to say, okay, we don't have enough fuel. We need to go get it from somewhere. We'll get it from her stored body fat. All right. How much you are burning per day is made up of 5 categories, let's say, for simplicity. The first one is your BMR. That's your basal metabolic rate. Like, if you just laid there all day, your body is going to burn calories just to stay alive. That, for most of my ladies, is going to be around 1,200 calories per day, just to stay alive, right? Then on top of that, you're going to have your NEAT, or your non-exercise activity, thermogenesis. And that is you sitting up, working. That is you typing. That is you walking to the kitchen to get something to eat. That is you going up your stairs to go to your room. That is driving in the car and moving your legs and moving your hands, right? Just your activity throughout the day. That may be 300 calories on your day, right? Then you have your specific activity factor. That's going to be where you specifically go to the gym, lift weights, burn calories, right? And that is going to be maybe another 300 calories each time. Then you have your thermal effect of food. That is just how much your body burns and the energy it needs to break down the food you're consuming. So that may be another 200 calories per day. So if you add all of that up, 1,200 plus the 300 from 1,200 just from your BMR, just from laying around all day, and then a 300 from taking, the stairs and walking and kind of writing, doing all these little tasks that add up their day. So then you're at 1,500. Then you have going to the gym. Then you're at 1,800. Then you have the thermal effect of food. Then you're at 2,000, right? This is just one example. It could vary slightly down or up. But all of this makes up how much you're burning per day. What happens is over time, this will change and adapt, especially if you are not eating enough. So if you're not eating enough, meaning you're in a calorie deficit, over time, this is going to decrease because your BMR and your metabolism is going to slow down. Our bodies are smart. It's going to say, hey, we're not getting enough nutrients in. We need to slow down this system because we only have so much energy available and we need to conserve it. Naturally, your NEAT will decrease throughout the day. Even like you're tapping your foot, how much you stand up or sit down, like all of that is going to slowly start to suppressing over time, even if you're not even aware of it, right? Then your specific activity factor. Now, generally, you don't start going to the gym less, but you might if you feel more tired, right? Or just how much you are pushing it in the gym may start to decrease. And then your thermal effect of food. If you're eating less, then this category is going to go down just from eating less, right? Because it's just based off the energy required to break down the food that you're consuming. So all of those over time will be suppressed. So this is a common scenario that might happen. Let's say you casually just eat 1,500 calories a day because you've been told like, oh, you have to eat 1,500 calories. So that's what you do. Then you're like, okay, well, I want to decrease body fat. So now I need to go into a calorie deficit at 1,200 calories. Okay, so then your body over time, let's say that you do that for months, then your body's like, okay, well, we got to suppress. So we got to suppress even more and go even lower. Well, then in order to decrease more body fat, like you would plateau, right? Because how much you're burning per day would then start to equal how much you're consuming per day. So then you would need to go to like 900 calories or even lower to keep decreasing body fat. And that's just too low. It's not sustainable. And even if you wanted to, right, you would run into issues trying to adhere to that because you'd be hangry, hormones would start to suffer, and it just would not work out very well. So that's one example. Another example I see is just people who are just constantly in a calorie deficit or try to be diet all the time. So this is where people who say, oh, what I used to do isn't working anymore. And it's likely because this formula still holds true, but they're unknowingly changing things in the formula where they suppress their metabolism because they've always been dieting. So another example to think about is, have you ever like decluttered your house or went on a cleaning spree and you're like all energized at first and you're like everything is sparkling and you're getting super, super like into it. But then after a while, you just feel like drained and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this for every single room, and you just feel like you can't even think straight and you're cleaning and you're like, I told myself I would do it, just keep cleaning, you got to get to the next room, but you're like going so slow now and you like can't think straight. That is just like a perfect example for how when you're not eating enough for too long, how that can feel, and then you're kind of like you're in this place of diminishing returns. So if you go back to that bar chart and think about how much you're burning per day versus how much you're consuming per day, it may be wise, if you're in the scenarios I just shared, especially, if you've hit a plateau, to increase how much you are burning per day, not by just adding more workouts, but by eating enough. On the other side of this, if you haven't been dieting, right, it is probably smart to max out all of these areas of how much you're burning per day. So your metabolism, get it as high as you can, your NEAT, right, naturally through food, don't suppress that, how much hard you're going in the gym and how much muscle you're building, like through getting enough food, your thermal effect of food will naturally increase just from eating more food. It is probably ideal and smart to max that out first before going into a calorie deficit. It will be much easier on your body to decrease body fat. You can eat a lot more food because you've maxed out how much you're burning per day, right? And when I say max out, I'm just talking about using food to be able to do this. I don't mean just working out more and more and more. This is why I recommend eating enough first for at least 1 or 2 months before going into a calorie deficit for 2 to 3 months. And this is exactly what we do in Create Your Shape. This is why it's called the nutrition strategy, because there's a strategy and a science behind it. And you are not just cut calories, right? You want to create leverage and really work the system and set yourself up not only to be able to optimally build muscle and decrease body fat, but to be able to sustain it in the long run and support yourself in terms of energy levels and being well fueled and hormones and supporting your metabolism for the long term through having an optimal strategy. So I hope you enjoyed this explanation. And if you are somebody who feels confused on this or you enjoyed this, then you're definitely a good fit for Create Your Shape. And I invite you to join us when we open for enrollment this Sunday. You can learn more and mark your calendars at the link in the show notes. And I'll see you next week on the Create Your Shape podcast.